Welcome to the Meet Musings podcast, the show where we talk about different issues and disabilities that affect people emotionally, psychologically, physically, and mentally. We discuss health and well-being generally. We are amplifying the voices of people living with disabilities and limitations and breaking the stigmas. Our podcast is available on Podbean, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Amazon Podcast, TuneIn and Alexa, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. We are also available on Listen Note, Radio Public and iHeartRadio. Just search Meet Musings Podcast on any social media platform. Welcome!
Hi guys, welcome to the Meet Musings Podcast. In this series, we are discussing sickle cell disorder, a disorder that affects over 4.5 million people worldwide. With me today is Nike Ajene. She is a lone parent. My guest is a mother to 3 children, one of them a young man living with sickle cell disorder. So welcome to the Meet Musings podcast. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Nike. I'm Nike Ajene. And like you said, I'm a mother to a son living with sickle cell.
Thank you for that introduction. How has that been?
Well, it's been an experience.
How long has your son been diagnosed with sickle cell?
My son has been living with sickle cell now for over 18 years. Yeah, so it's been an experience. Yeah, it's been interesting.
I can imagine. Do you have other children?
Yeah, I have 3 kids. It's the middle one that's got sickle cell. The oldest one hasn't, and the youngest one hasn't got sickle cell. So I've got 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl.
Oh.
So the first 2 are boys, and the last one is a girl.
How do they feel about their brother when he has a sickle cell crisis?
You know, it's been a mixed. I think it's been mixed feelings for them over the years. The feelings have changed over the years. I think when they were very young, you know, as children, I think it kind of used to frighten them because, you know, they were kids themselves. They couldn't understand why their brother was in so much pain and crying and things like that.
What impact did that have on his siblings?
I think initially for other siblings, they can be quite frightened initially. Then after a while, they get used to it. They get used to seeing their brothers like that. It's funny because I think my son and my daughter have reacted to it differently. I don't know whether it's because of just the fact that they're the opposite sex, you know, and men and women react to things differently. So I don't know if that has been the case, but at a point, I think my older son kind of switched off. I think it was just too much for him. And because, you know, our family has been exposed to sickle cell for years, so it hasn't just been about my son.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I have nephews with sickle cell, you know.
Oh.
And I have a nephew living with sickle cell that had a stroke when he was just about, I think he must have been about 10. And it was a really, really bad one that he never recovered from. That kind of left him like in a vegetable state. So he can't do anything for himself. And I've lost a nephew to sickle cell that my older son used to be very, very close to. I've also lost a half brother to sickle cell, by the way.
Your half brother?
So, yes. So
it must be both of your parents have sickle cell trait.
It's interesting you say that because my mom and my dad, they have 7 of us. And my dad, we've always known that my dad is AS, which is why I and 2 of my other siblings are AS. Okay. And we've always assumed that my mom is AA. But my mom had to have an operation last year.
And you discovered she is AS.
So my mom discovered that she's AS at 80. No, but it was 69. That was a shock. It was
because there's no way a child would have SS traits if both parents don't have the
half brother. No, that was my half brother, not my full brother. That was my half brother from my dad. And we've always known my dad is AS. So it was like, oh, yes. So, well, his mother must have had AS and that's it. And because none of us, the seven of us, have SS, so we've always just assumed that my mom is AA. So she had to go for an operation last year, a hip operation. And she went for the operation down south near London. The test came up saying she was AS, and we're all in shock. It was like, and so she's like, I can't believe I had 7 children and none were SS.
Oh,
So
your
my
mom said that.
And
she must be lucky.
It just baffles the mind.
Extremely lucky.
I don't know. I've always thought, I just don't know. Because she's never even suspected that she could be AS, So that was a real shock. So in any case, I've known about sickle cell all my life, or basically most of my life, because of these things I've said of my nephews.
Cousins.
Yes. So I think with having lost my nephew when he was about 16 or thereabouts, and my older son was very, very close to him.
How did that affect his relationship with his siblings?
I think it kind of shut off after that. So it's been kind of shut off from sickle cell in a while. If his brother is ill and in hospital, it won't show up. So I think it's getting over it now. But I think that was a shock for him. He never expected to lose his cousin.
Oh.
And to have to lose his cousin, I think in some ways for a child, because he was about 11 then or something or thereabout. So I think for a child, he must have thought, that's the same thing my brother has.
That sticks in his head for some reason.
Yeah. So I think it's affected him that way. The younger sister she's been real supportive and because she was younger anyway, so a lot of times I just used to drag her along. She didn't have
moral support.
No, she didn't have a choice because, we've been in this country. You can't leave a child alone at home. Going into hospital or anything, I just dragged her along, And in retrospect, I don't think that was really good for her as well. Having a child on the word, saying the things she's saying at that age. And when you go into RMCH in Manchester, it's not just for sickle cell. There's also cancer. There's all sorts of things. Yes. So I don't think, in retrospect, thinking about it now, I don't think that was a really good thing to expose a child to that early as well. I think she saw too much as a child.
Tell us about your experience as a mother to a child with sickle cell disorder.
So I think with parents of people with sickle cell, when you've got other siblings, finding that balance can be quite hard. It can be quite hard, especially when you're alone in this country and you haven't really got help. So there's nowhere to drop off
your kids,
your kids, and I have to take them along, and they see all these things done to their brother. They see their brother crying in pain and in agony, and they see all these tears and all these needles, and they also get to see things happening on the ward with other kids and different kids screaming and things. So when I think back on it now, I think, yes, that has also had an adverse effect on her in some ways. I think it's just something for parents who have sickle cell children to think about. How do we balance the needs of the child who hasn't got sickle cell with the needs of the child that has? Yeah. So that is one thing I wish somebody could have told me earlier, to say, think about it, because you tend to get all focused on the child with sickle cell.
Yeah.
And all your attention is there and you give them more your attention.
Do you think parents do this consciously to their kids? Or is it just down to parental instinct to help a sick child?
You don't do it consciously. It's just they need more,
They need more help.
They're in pain. Exactly. They're in pain and you have to get them to the hospital. And sometimes you don't take that time to think, oh, what do I do with this one?
I think it's more about getting the balance right in a way that meets the needs and requirements for each child.
Like I said, if you haven't got help, it's not really your fault. There's really nothing much you can do about it.
Do you have any support system in place?
One of the things that I found out later that I wish somebody had also told me was we could have made a demand on social services to say, I need help. Is there a way just to keep this child out of this situation and things like that? But those were the things that I didn't know, that I could ask. Coupled also with the fact that a lot of our people are suspicious of social services anyway, because you're thinking, if I keep calling on them, Would they start putting their mouth in my business? And
Yeah,
things
but
like
it's
that.
about getting help. It's about you asking for help about
Yes,
your child's welfare. It's not
exactly.
you risking that child. You're not putting the child at risk by asking for help.
Yes, which is true. But like I said, we haven't had the best relationship. Our people haven't had the best relationship with social workers. So you tend to get suspicious of them as well. And you think of these things that, am I opening myself up to danger here?
Yeah.
If I keep asking for help from social services. It also depends on the council in which you live. I used to live in Bolton and now live in Suffolk Council. And I've seen a massive difference,
In the
you know,
care.
in the care. It's just things that I used to really fight for.
Is the care system in Salford, is it better than Bolton?
I think it is because, well, I just moved this year and I moved just shortly before the pandemic. So in some ways, I'm also conscious of the fact that as that had an effect on the care, because
Mhm.
now, there's the thing about shielding and letters going out and everybody
Yeah.
is being on edge. In some ways, I can't fully evaluate the difference now because I'm thinking if I stayed in Bolton, would they have suddenly become more caring as well because of the pandemic? I don't know. I don't think so.
How long did you live in Bolton before you moved to Salford?
I lived in Bolton for 12 years, and in the 12 years, I tried everything I could think of to get social services to help with my son's care.
What resources are available for you both in terms of care and support?
I tried to do things like, to get an OT, an occupational therapist, to come evaluate him because somebody suggested that. And I never got anywhere. Two social services came to my house once. This was about 6 or 7 years ago. They came in, it was in school. They came in, they looked around, asked me a few questions, whatever. They said, oh, we'll get back to you. They never did. I couldn't even remember their name. So, because at that time, Bolton Council was setting up a register. I can't remember what they called the register, but basically, it was to register all the kids that had disabilities in the council, so that they could help with care and to see what each child needs. And they didn't do anything. And I remember somebody telling me and saying, well, they must have come and assessed you and thought, oh, your child is not in danger, so why bother? But they never did.
What should that be, really? After they take all your details, after they
Yeah, they never
come for the
did. And
assessment?
they never did. And when I was having challenges with school and things for my son, I called Bolton Council and I said, oh, well, it should be on this list. I can't remember what the list was called. And I said, well, my son should be on this list. They said, oh, no, it's not on the list. And I said, are you joking? Well, two of your social workers came to my house. They said, no, there's no record. Did you ever have records of social services coming to my house? No
Where did
record.
the record go?
I don't know. If not that, the ladies that came, one of them sent me an email initially to book the appointment. There would have been absolutely no record. And that was what I emailed back to the lady who spoke to me and said, look at this email. These are the name. That was when I realized there was actually a name on the email. I said, this is the name of the lady who emailed me and said she was going to put my son on that record. And they came to my house. So what happened? How come there was no record? My son had he had avascular necrosis and he was struggling. And one of the nurses said, "Get an OT to come to the house and do an assessment to see what he needs. You might be able to get help with things like putting in things in the bath, maybe something to help him get upstairs and things like that." And I called Bolton Cancer and they gave me the run around for about 4 years and did nothing until I gave up. I just gave up.
How did that make you feel?
I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. In the meantime, I just got everything. I just paid for everything myself.
When your son was younger, did
Yes.
you have to take time off work to care for
Yes.
him?
Oh, I did many times. Many times. And I've had to leave jobs because of that. I remember when he was really, really young, I was only working part-time. I made the decision that I would rather manage with whatever little money I have and have that time than work full time and not have the time. And because I've been a lone parent since I've been in this country, I've been on my own with the kids. I've got 3 kids. And I've been on my own with them now for about 16 years. When my son was very young, I just said, do you know what? I'm just going to work part-time.
Why did you decide to go part-time?
Because that would give me time to pay attention to my kids and pay attention especially to the one with the sickle cell. So I was working part-time. So I used to do this job where I was working just 9 to 1 every day because I just thought that would give me time to drop them off in school, go to work. And before they finish at 3, I'm done, I'm finished. I was working 20 hours a week. Because I was working 20 hours a week, that also helped with things like working tax credit and child tax credit. I don't know if you know about this country. If you work less than 16 hours a week, you don't get any of that.
Yeah.
So I chose to work 20 hours a week. And in those days, it was a lot more better. Working tax credit and things like that, they were a lot more supportive than you have it now. So I decided to work 20 hours a week. And I remember at that time, my job sent...
How were you able to manage on your own with 20 hours a week of work?
Yeah.
And having 3 kids, I suppose you have to pay for your rent. You have to pay your bills out of that.
Like I said, I got working tax credit. But that's I was fortunate in the sense that I could apply for things like that. And I understand that there are mothers out there who don't have access to things like that. Because I was working 20 hours a week, I got child tax credit and I got help with housing benefits.
Okay.
And council tax benefits.
Okay.
So basically, I got help with those things. But was still tough because it meant that I didn't have much extra for anything. My job was basically, at that time, if you want to work, and that's one of the things that a lot of sickle cell parents struggle with, because if you're working part-time and things like that, you tend to get jobs at minimum wages. You don't get really good jobs.
So you don't want to pursue a career, so to say.
Exactly. You can't because if you do part-time, it affects your career.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a qualified engineer, but I couldn't do anything like that. At that point, I was working basically a minimum wage. I was working with child support agency and I was just doing part-time, 20 hours. But the interesting thing was, and that also, because like I said, I go to work at 9, by 1 I'm finished. So it means that the days it was in school, that was perfect. But if it wasn't in school and it was ill, I had to take time off work.
How often was that? Were you ever penalized for taking time off work to care for him?
I remember it got to a point at work, I was told that I was taking off too much time and I was going to face disciplinary. And mind you, this was a job that when I didn't turn up, I didn't get paid. So it's not like some jobs where you can take leave or you're applying for your leave. I just didn't get paid. They don't pay you,
Don't you think it's because your organization do not understand how sickle cell impacts on you if your child is sick with sickle cell?
No, they didn't. This was 16, 18 years ago, so no, they didn't.
I had to, as late in time as 2008 to 2016, I kept educating my employers about sickle cell. Anytime I'm in crisis, they don't even understand that being in crisis means you cannot do some things. You don't even want to you can't even get out of bed. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I had problems with work in the sense that I was getting disciplinary, where it was like you're taking too much time off work for your son. And mind you, this was a part-time job. So the days I didn't go in, they didn't pay me. You could also do a kind of flex, they will say it. So if I was supposed to go in on Thursday and I had to take time off because of my son, I could go in, I could change with somebody else and go in on a Saturday or even on a Sunday. No, there was no Sunday or the Saturday, which was something a lot of people hated. A lot of people didn't like coming into work on Saturday.
Yeah.
But I would volunteer to go in on a Saturday or maybe on a day where he had to go in for blood tests or something. I would change with somebody else. I was still getting all this, you're going to get disciplined. So that was why I decided I was going to retrain as a teacher. And I went in and did my PGCE and I got my teaching certificate to teach mathematics in colleges and further education and adult learning.
How did you get on with that?
I soon found out that the life of a teacher was not an easy one. You have to plan lessons. There's so much work to do after school is over, after college is over. It was tough, But the good thing about it is my manager, I think she also had a child with a disability, so she was quite understanding. And she would let me do my planning and everything from home. But that wasn't as nice as you think it
But
was.
not everybody gets that same opportunity to have a career change or
No,
even
no,
have a manager
exactly.
that
So
understands your
yes,
condition.
exactly. So I'm so grateful to God because I've been very fortunate in some places. But that also meant that when I was at home, I didn't really pay attention to the kids, and they used to complain and say, "Mom, you're always working." And it was hard to explain to young children that, yeah, but I'm still working just because I'm at home. I'm still working because my manager has allowed me to come to my lesson planning and marking and things from home. Just come into college and teach at your actual classes and do a few things so you can go home and do the rest. So that was hard on the kids as well. But that was easier. And now because I had like a full-time job, a permanent job, the days my son had to go into hospital because he was ill, I could take leave. I could just apply for leave. And that is one thing now I have done for years now. I don't take leave at work like other people, like you say, normal people take leave. I keep my leave for emergencies in case I need it
Because of your child.
because of my child. And that's what I do because that is so much easier than saying, oh, can I have time off? Because the legislation says you can't be denied annual leave. So it's much easier to just say, I'm applying for annual leave. And I know a lot of people say, well, that is not very fair because people get annual leave and go on holidays and whatever, but
So
you
that
use
means you
those.
forfeit your holidays.
Exactly. Don't get me wrong, there have been years that have been good that I haven't used up all my
No,
annual
but
leave on
you really should not
hospitals,
have to forfeit
you
your
know.
holidays
Yeah,
because of your child or
but
because
that's
the
what
child has sickle
happens.
cell.
But that's what happens. That's what happens.
That's
And you know,
that's exactly the point here.
yeah, that's what happens. You know, that's what parents with sickle cell children have to face. I think it was in 2009. Was it in 2009? What year are we now? No, not 2009. It must have been about 2016 or thereabout. My son got developed AV, vascular necrosis.
How bad was that? Did he need hospitalization? How long for?
That year was tough. It was really, really tough. I stopped working completely. I had to. I resigned and I became a full-time carer. Fortunately for me, I'm trying to be very sure about the year, but it was in year 9 in school. So, of course, the older one was now in college. So that made my life so much easier. And the younger one was in primary 6, I think. So it wasn't as bad as when they were very, very young. And but it developed a vascular necrosis, and that year was really, really tough.
How did that particular illness affect him?
It got so bad that it couldn't walk. So the NHS had to give us a wheelchair.
Wow.
You know, it was just a tough year. It was a tough year. I just couldn't work that year. So I had to resign. That year, it was practically at home. He missed so much of that school year. In fact, he went on to miss most of years 10 and 11 as well because he had it really bad those 3 years.
That must
And
have affected his grades at the end of the day.
it did. It did. It did. Because he was hardly ever in school. In fact, I looked at this attendance register for years 10 and 11, and I think he was in school for about 30% of the time. It was really tough. And
Did
finally,
they give him extra time or did they make up
nothing.
for him?
Do you know what? We learn lessons from this thing. If I'm talking to somebody with a sickle cell child now who develops the same thing, I would know what to say to them. I grew up in Nigeria. In Nigeria, when your teacher says something, is like we will say they're like the second to gods. You just automatically believe everything they tell you and you respect them and whatever. And I think that affected how I handled some of those things. When it started AV and it wasn't going to school, I actually went into school and I spoke to them. And they said, oh, okay. So we had an agreement where they said, we will send all his work home by email so that he can work on them.
How did he cope with that? What effect did that have on you and the children?
For some reason, it never occurred to me to say, you're sending a child work by email. Is he supposed to teach himself? After everything occurred to me, it just did not occur to me at that moment because And I think, here I am. I'm a lone parent. I've got a child is ill. I've got two other children. There's so many things going on. And you're just not in the frame of mind to think clearly because you have all these things that you're combating. I realized that I wasn't thinking very clearly because I was so worried about my son. And that is another thing. A lot of us don't think about the impact on our mental health and how we reason and things like that. Those are not things you think about. And I just said, okay. So they will send some bits of work to him at home. And when he's not in pain or when he can sit up in bed, he will have a look at these things.
How did he get through the homework?
This was a year 9 child who is about 13, 14. You can't teach yourself maths and physics and biology and whatever else it does. You can't teach yourself at home. But that just, for some reason, that just didn't occur to me. And then on the days he could go to school, he could no longer climb the steps to his classes. So they will say, okay, you sit in the library on the ground floor. We get your teachers to send work down to you. And my son would say, they'll put him in the library and they'll forget him there.
How does sitting in the library differ from him sitting at home and getting that work sent to him?
Thank you. But even at that, they will leave him in the library and forget him there. No work will be sent to him. So he would just sit there, nothing. They were supposed to get him. You would have thought they would get him like a teaching assistant to sit with him and explain things. Nothing.
And this is a child that has missed days and months of class attendance. In essence, he pushes himself to physically be in school and still doesn't get anything done.
Yes. And they will just leave him there. But he will want to go to school and he will say, I'm going, Mom. He forced himself on some days. And they would just forget him there. And so he kept missing and missing. And finally, I think I complained once because I went in, I spoke to the special educational need teacher or whatever in school. And she said, we haven't got the funding for him to apply for things like that. He can't have a personal assistant because it's just a medical need he has. And as long as that has been handled.
In all this, how did you feel?
Do you know the kind of frustration I went through? Nothing was being done. And finally, I said, can you apply? I practically pushed them. Can you apply for EHCP for my son? So that if we can get some funding, then we can get extra help for him. They said, okay. They wouldn't do this application. They kept turning me around in circles.
Did you try going through the GP for him?
That was the funny thing. My son never goes to the GPs. We have a GP, but my son never goes to the GPs.
Why is that?
Because we were living in Bolton and his doctor in Manchester made an agreement with one of the pediatricians in Bolton so that I could go into Bolton for his blood tests and things like that so that I didn't have to drive to Manchester all the time.
Okay.
And this doctor, Dr. Watson, she was a brilliant doctor. She was a really nice doctor. So she gave him open access to the ward in Bolton. So anytime he was feeling ill or whatever, we just used to go straight to the ward. And so because of that, he never used to go to the GPs. He would just go straight to the ward. And if it was something that they wouldn't admit him or whatever for, they would treat him, talk to him, and they'd say, okay, if he wants to, he could rest for 24 hours and then go home. And so because of this, I never really took him to the GPs. And also because a few times I would try to book an appointment for the GP. They never used to have appointments. They'd be like, oh, no, we don't have appointments today. Do you want to call in 2-3 days or something?
That's another thing, because when you're in crisis, you need critical care.
After that, I was like, what's the point of going to the GPs? Because if you're even in crisis, what will a GP do for you anyway? There's no point. So I just used to bypass the GP. And a few times I've gone in for, little things like, oh, he's coughing. Yeah, and I'll say, oh, I've just brought him in because I just want you to listen to his chest. Because there's no point going to the hospital if he's okay. But I'm not a doctor, so I can't listen to his chest. But can you please listen to his chest? Because I used to be so scared of him because he's had a few chest crises.
That can be scary. Having chest crisis is quite complicated for anyone living with sickle cell.
Well, so when he's having cold and things, I just want to please listen to his chest for me. And when I take him to the GPs, and the GP will be like, if that is the case, I think you should just go to the doctors. So I just said to myself, what's the point of GP, So that was how we stopped going to the GPs. So we just go straight to the hospital now.
How did he progress from sitting in the library with nothing to work on?
So one of the doctors in Manchester stepped in finally and said, and referred him to a school in Bolton. It's called the Park School, which is for, I never knew about it until the doctor referred him. But apparently that is the school for children with disability in Bolton.
Oh.
You know, if you have a disability, you go to Park School. But this was another frustration for me.
Was he accepted at the Park School eventually?
It was accepted at Park School. But I found out, and my son didn't tell me on time, because what they do with their Park School is they said, okay, if you've missed so much of school, instead of you leaving school with no qualification, you can come into Park School to do level 2 maths and English. At least you can leave school with those 2 qualifications. Because at the end of the day, when you want to go into uni or whatever, they always ask for maths and English anyway. But my frustration with Park School was, he went to Park School, and for some reason, the tutors in Park School thought he had a learning disability. If you see me moving,
there's a miscommunication between the referral and the school?
No, it says on there, okay, I think where the miscommunication came from was the fact that because of the AV, and he was missing so much of school. Actually, we discussed it recently, said, I lost all my friends because he was no longer going to school. So he lost all his friends. He was in the house most times. And then they wanted him to go into Park School fully. But he refused and said, no, I'm not becoming a full-time student of Park School. Definitely. When we were talking last week, I'm in a battle with his college at the moment because of this GCSE thing.
How did he get on with his GCSE?
He couldn't really do much GCSE because of the 3 years he missed school. So he's gone into college and he's supposed to do GCSEs before he graduates.
So what resources are available to your son at the college?
Just like secondary school, they are not offering much support as well. He still doesn't have a personal tutor. They expect him to turn up to pick up classes at 7 p.m., which he can't manage, and so many things like that. So that's another battle now that I'm currently in.
Like I say all the time, sickle cell is not a one-size-fits-all kind of illness. Each person needs to have a personal care plan. One that works for me would necessarily not work for your son. For his education, I think he needs more support than people living with sickle cell in his category. He has a lot of complications going on.
I just think it's been very, very unfair to people with sickle cell. They were taking him through, because they were supposed to be taking him through level 2 maths and English. But like I said, because of being at home and not being able to mix with his friends and being constantly in pain, he got a bit depressed. Okay. So the pediatric doctor I mentioned before, Dr. Watson, she noticed it even before I did. And she said, oh, he needs to go to CAMS. So she made a referral for him to go to CAMS just to have some counseling and talk to somebody about how the pain is affecting him and things like that. Yeah. So I think because he was referred to CAMS, you know what CAMS is? CAHMS.
Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service.
Yeah. Anyway, because it was referred there, I think that gave the people at Park School the impression that he had mental health and learning disability issues. I think they kind of started treating him that way. It wasn't until a while later I learned that they were putting him through things like entry level 1, level 2, math, and taking it so slowly, because by the time I found out, because, my son is very, very reserved and private persons. And he doesn't
really talk about how things are affecting him.
Exactly. So by the time I found out, it was pretty much late in the game. And the school hadn't supported him as they should as well. So I went ahead and I applied for because I got so tired of the whole thing. So I went ahead and applied for EHCP myself. But it came back rejected. And I did ask for a feedback. And I said, I want to know why it was rejected. So the EHCP people called me to a meeting. And they told me very clearly, they said, they agreed to meet with me because I'm a parent. that if it had been the school, they wouldn't have even agreed to see them. And the lady said to me, she said, I've gone through your files and I'll tell you now, your son's school failed him.
Wow.
She said they failed him. She said there is absolutely no evidence of support, and that unfortunately, EHCP can't put in more money or support when the school hasn't shown how they have supported a kid in the first place. Because the EHCP is additional funding. The school needs to show that they've supported the student and
to a certain degree.
Exactly. That they need to show that they have spent at least £6,000 on him, is what they told me. And that this child needs more support. And because they have absolutely no record of support for my son, which the EHCP person told me was astounding, that they were shocked. What exactly have they been doing for the past 3 years? And she told me that if I wanted, I could write a letter of complaint. I should put in a complaint against the school. No? But at this point, all this happened about 2 weeks. He was supposed to leave secondary school. I'd already started. So I said, well, there's no point. Because what do I want to start dragging with him now? Do you understand? That I wish somebody had told me all this a year, 2 years ago, then, something could have been done, but it was already too late. And I said, okay, I'll leave it. It's going into college. I would leave it. When it goes into college, I will apply. Went into college, and I will tell you this because I'm saying this so that other parents can learn from this and can know what to expect and put things in place that I didn't know to put in place. Mm-hmm. So it went into college. College told me, they sent me a letter. They actually sent me a letter about 4 weeks before registration and said that it cannot register at college.
Why is that?
Because they've read the letter I've written. It has additional needs and they have no funding for him.
Wow.
So can I please apply to another college?
So they rejected him from college. But that should be considered as discrimination against him.
That was what they told me. I just threw the letter away. I threw the letter away because I was like...
That must have been upsetting to you and to him.
It was. And to make the matters worse, this person who sent me the letter went on leave. The very next day, they sent me the letter. So I couldn't even get back to them. And they were on leave up until when registration started. So I just threw away the letter and I said, that is the most ridiculous thing I'd ever seen in my life. Register him where? This college, Bolton College, was very close to my house. Yeah. It was just about 10 minutes away from my house, which would have made life so easy for him. There's no other college in Bolton, apart from Bolton College, and he couldn't do A-levels because of the way the result, because he couldn't do GCSEs. So it was starting from level 2 in college. It was starting from level 2 BTEC. Where would I have registered him? And she made this suggestion about maybe I should look at Suffolk College. And I'm thinking, are you crazy? So how is he supposed to be getting to Suffolk College? Anyway, I threw away the letter, to be honest with you, and I went in and I registered him. And I was so fortunate that she forgot to put anything against his name. So I went in and I registered him. And then she came back on leave and found out he had been registered. And then she sent an email saying, why did I register him after she told me that they couldn't register him? And I said, well, I'm sorry that I'm going to register my son. Do you expect him to stay home for the next 1 year? Or what do you expect? Because he can't go to any other college. She said, oh, I could have gone to the different schools. That schools have colleges. And I said, well, most schools have BTEC, yes. But there's no point. This is the college that is most suitable for him. So we had an argument about that. And then she said, well, I've put her in an awkward position because if she tells him to withdraw now, it's going to affect the child because he's already registered. So she would let it go because it was her fault. She should have put something on his name so that they wouldn't have been able to register him.
Put a red flag on him.
Red flag on his name, and that was the fortunate thing. And I thank God for that because she forgot to do that. So he got registered. And then she said, well, we haven't got funding for him this year. I'm not sure we'll be able to support him. And I said, do you know what? That's okay. That's okay. But I would rather he be in college because he's already feeling down and a bit depressed because he's missed so much of school and he's at home. He's lost all his friends.
Yeah.
And the camps lady said, you need to get him out of the house. This is what is causing the depression. Get out there. So I said, well, he needs to go to college and he's not staying at home. So I put him in college and she said, okay, we have to apply for EHCP immediately so that he can get EHCP. And I said, yes, that's what I would like. So we applied for EHCP. And because my son was also complaining about some things which sounded a bit like dyslexia, they got an educational psychologist to come assess him. But she said that it's okay, he hasn't got dyslexia, but it just that she can see that the pain affects his learning and things like that. So she made some recommendations. So she said on assessing him that when he's in pain, that the pain affects his short-term memory. Apparently, she went into his class a couple of days to monitor him over a couple of days. And she said she noticed that when he's in pain, it affects his short-term memories, that it tends to forget things immediately. And she said that affects his memory. And so she made some recommendations at how it can be supported by that. She said, for example, when teachers are talking and is in a bit of pain, it needs somebody to break down things for him or to write it down for him so that later he can go back to it and things like that. So they said, oh, does he want a class support tutor? My son, to be honest, my son said, no, I don't want anybody following me around. I don't want an in-class support tutor. I don't want to look weird because you know how students are, it's the time. When you have a teaching assistant sitting by you, people just assume you're stupid. He said, I don't want anybody following me around and doing that. And I said, okay, if you can get somebody he can come see somebody one-to-one to help him with his work and whatever, that would be better. But apparently, I don't know whether college doesn't have that or because it didn't have the funding in place, it couldn't do that for him. So anyway, this is his third year in Bolton College because he's done the year 2, he's done the first year of year 3, and is in second year of year 3 now of Big 10 level 3. It's amazing because he's passed his English, but he's had barely any support for his maths. He was supposed to do the maths GCSE again this year because the first year he had a crisis, the money of maths GCSE.
The anxiety and all that triggers sickle cell crisis as well.
Exactly. So he went in, but if he insisted in going in, the EHCP person said, oh, well, then he didn't get EHCP again because the EHCP guy came and said the same thing. But college is not supporting him, so they can't put in extra money. College needs to show that they supported him. And they claimed that, well, they couldn't really provide any support because my son is rejecting support. But that is because the support they are providing is not what he needs. If you're forcing somebody to take support that it's not what he needs. So no EHCP for him, no extra money. Basically, college isn't too interested in supporting him. They claim they don't have the money to support him because they couldn't get an EHCP.
How is your son coping now? Has your son having sickle cell impacted on his education and the grades he has?
So basically, we've been managing by ourselves. And this last GCSE, as we all know, it was cancelled. And this is where I, as a parent now, I'm really mad. I'm really angry because it was cancelled and they gave him a predictive grade of 3, which is a fail. And I said, how did you arrive at this grade? This boy got a 3 in secondary school when he hadn't even been in college for almost 3 years. He sat the exam and got a 3. That is to show you that he has some knowledge of math. So if you support him, like the English teacher has supported him, with the English, he got a 6.
Was that for this year's GCSE?
That was in last year, not this one that was cancelled. And if you support him very well, he will get the same thing in maths. It's not stupid. And they came back to me and said, the prediction was based on your participation and class attendance. And I said, that is
the class attendance is affected by crisis.
Exactly. And I said, that discriminates against my son because if he's hardly in class or when he's in class because he's in pain, he's just sat at the back struggling and is not really participating or getting involved. So according to you, that means he doesn't know anything and you've just written him off. I said, that is what you have done. You have written him off because he's not as boisterous as other people in class. He doesn't talk much. He just sits behind quietly listening to what you're saying. And a lot of the time, he's not in school. when COVID started, the week after COVID started, he had a chest crisis and he went into ICU. He was in hospital for 10 days, at the start of COVID. And I was so worried because he was in an ICU filled with COVID patients. All that was
and it
going
was quite
on.
scary that time.
Exactly. And all that was going on. So apparently this teacher had put on mock exams for students to do. My son was in ICU. I couldn't get into his college emails and whatever. I forgot to take the password of him. I couldn't get in there. So by the time he came back after 10 days from hospital, about a week after that or more, he was still trying to get himself. He was finally able to say, let me log on and see what is happening. He found this test that had been set up. He found that he was supposed to have done all these tests. He tried doing them. He had been locked out of them apart from 2 because they had expired. So he emailed his teacher and said, do you know what? I've been in hospital. I've just come back and I've found all these tests. I couldn't do them. And she said, oh, just do what you can do then. Just do whatever is left. So he did only 2. So apparently,
those are the 2 that were still in date.
So apparently, because he did only 2, they weren't enough. So even though he did those 2, and immediately the computer told me you're working at level 5, it was discarded. Because as far as they're concerned,
because he didn't do the previous assessments.
Exactly. He didn't do all the others. And I'm thinking, because he couldn't. He emailed you, he's in hospital. Was he supposed to have done this test from hospital in ICU? So I just said, this discriminates against my son. So I wrote them and I appealed the exam on his behalf. I helped him to appeal the exam. They came back. That was when they came back and told me this nonsense about, oh, well, it was based on your class participation and things like that. Right now, I have sent this appeal, I've written, and then we got into argument with the college about they're not being able to, not supporting my son. And they claim that they have been, that no, they've done all the support. They gave him a lift pass. They gave him time in class, extra time for his exams, and he can get out of class to use the toilet to stretch his legs. And
the question we should be asking at this stage is, were those adjustments made for him reasonable and adequate for his needs?
I don't care. That is good. Fine, you've done that.
But that is class-related activities. But this
exactly
is a boy that was in ICU.
How does that help him to pass an exam? You're not supporting him. You're not teaching him. When he's been ill and he hasn't been in college and he goes back, nobody actually sits him down to say, this is what we've learned while you were away, and teach him the basic principles. They just carry on. And I used to be a maths teacher, and I know you cannot teach somebody maths if he doesn't know the basic principles of math. I know that for a fact because I was a maths teacher. You build on principles in math. If I haven't taught you how to do division, and then I suddenly give you fraction work or whatever, you're just going to sit down there confused because you haven't taught the basic principles. And I've been saying all this, but they claim, oh, they've been supporting him, blah, blah, blah. And the lady, the support tutor, was even quite rude, telling my son and saying, well, it was his fault that he wasn't matured enough. I've got emails saying that obviously wasn't matured enough. And saying that, oh, they tried to help him, he walked away. And my son replied and said, that is not possible. I'm not a rude person. If a teacher comes to me and said, I'm here to help you, I won't walk away. And
I think this needs to be raised with the education authority.
As I'm talking to you now, because I was so angry, I sent him for an FOI saying, I want to know how other students with disability were marked. 1, I want to know how they were assessed. Let me know whether, and I want to know how other people of Black ethnic minorities were assessed. I want to know whether this is just a discrimination against his disability or a discrimination against his ethnicity or a combination of both. And they haven't answered me.
I don't know how long the response time for freedom of information requests are, but I do know they take quite a while to respond.
The FOI expired last week. So on Monday morning, I am going to be forwarding this to the ICO, and I'm going to be forwarding it to Ofsted and the people who monitor further education, because I think this is just not acceptable.
What date was the expiry date of the FOI?
It was the Friday before the last. And then I emailed them again to say, why have you not answered me? And I've given them another week and they haven't come back to me. So on Monday, I'm going to be sending out these emails to ICO and the rest. And I just want parents of people with sickle cell to be aware of that. Schools, you need to be very firm with schools. Those were the mistakes I made. Because when he was in secondary school, I should have insisted and said, you need to get him a teaching assistant or something. You need to get him. You can't send work home. If you're sending work home with a child, are you saying the child should teach him or herself? How does a child teach him or herself physics and chemistry or geography or whatever at that age? It's not that you've taught them already and you're telling them to go read up. You haven't taught them at all. They can't do that by themselves. So for me now, I have registered him with private tutoring for math because I told the college plain, I said, I'm sorry, but I do not trust you. I can't trust you with my son's GCSE education anymore. And the funny thing is that the main course is doing so well on that because the teachers on that course have been really good. They call him. So now that there's COVID, one of the things he's agreed with them is that he's become a home student, online student. So everything is done online with him now for his main course. But that is because the teachers on that main course have been so good. They've set him up on Teams and online. They call him once a week to explain things to him. And, it's still not perfect. Yeah, he emails to say,
it's better than the support he had from the previous tutors.
Exactly. So if he says, I can't understand this, what am I supposed to do? Sometimes they don't get back to him for a week or more or whatever. But at least it's not.
That's one way this COVID outbreak has benefited a lot of people. It's not just sickle cell sufferers or people with disabilities alone. People are working from home and from the convenience of their houses, and they don't have to even get out of their house. They don't have to leave the comfort of their house. So with this COVID outbreak, how has the care given to your son changed?
It's been basically the same, really. His doctor's appointment now are by phone. They're telephone consultations. So it's been shielding since March and he hasn't been out of the house except for medical appointments and things like that. That has been okay. But when it comes to maths, GCSE maths, I've just realized that the college can't help him. So now I've registered him for private tutoring to get him to...
At your own expense, right?
At my own expense, yes. At my own expense. At my own expense. Even before COVID, funny enough, I did get him a private tutor that I was paying £25 an hour to, just to come to, because I realized that the college is just not helping him. And I wanted him to pass that maths. And unfortunately, COVID happened. So the tutor had to stop. And then it's been graded based on something that it was virtually impossible for him to achieve, class attendance and things like that, and participation and all sorts, which I think is discriminating. And I've actually called it the Sickle Cell Society about this as well, because I wanted to find out and say, are there other parents in my shoes? Can we get together and possibly write the government or do something to say the COVID discriminated against a certain type of people? This marking that was done GCSE has discriminated against certain people. Because I can imagine children with sickle cell out there who maybe missed a lot of secondary school as well because of one thing or the other, or have had a hard time catching up in school. They had to say GCSE this year and they couldn't because of COVID. I can imagine that this has discriminated against them as well.
And it's raised a lot of mental health issues for the young ones as well.
Yeah. This has really affected him, like you said, because he just looked at me one day and said, Mom, they just make me feel stupid now. And I just feel like I can never pass maths. And I said, no, you can. Remember, when you sat your SATs in primary school, you had one of the best results for maths. And when you went into secondary school, you were predicted a 7 in math until this happened in year 9.
What subject does your son want to study in university?
He wants to do games design in university. So at the moment, he's doing IT.
It requires maths for that.
It does need maths. But if you haven't done much of year 9, year 10, year 11, You've missed so much
It's
math, so much math. And unfortunately, unlike English, math is not something that you catch up so easily with. You need dedicated teaching.
Do you have any advice that you might want to give other parents from your experience?
One thing I would say to other parents, which was the mistake I made, do not leave your child's education to teachers. Don't trust teachers with your child's
No,
education.
you have to. I think
Don't.
it's something that parents often take for granted that
Yeah,
teachers know it all, but at
yeah.
the end of
Like I
the
said,
day,
especially we that came from Nigeria, when
yeah,
you always think
or
teachers know it
even any
all.
other African country,
Yeah, exactly. No,
it's
do
about even
not.
it's not even about teaching alone. Your education, your health, your
Yeah,
work, your mental, nothing. You don't leave
yeah.
anything to anybody
Don't,
else because they
don't.
have their own problems as well. At the end of the day, doctors, nurses, teachers, pastors do a great job, but no one is infallible. Your child is your responsibility. You are the architect of your own fortune.
Exactly. Don't trust that the teachers of your children are really looking out for your children at all times. Don't get me wrong, there are very good teachers out there, really good teachers out there. But don't trust, should I say, not even teachers, the school. Don't just trust the school that they're doing the best for your child. Don't. You need to get in there. You need to demand to see what they're actually doing. You need to think about it that this whatever they've put in place, does this really help my child? Does it help the school? Does it help the school to just tick a box to say, oh, yeah, we're
Yeah.
providing support? Yeah. Or is it really helping your child? Because for me, sending my work home, which, because I was so overwhelmed with everything that was going on then, I didn't think much about it, was not helping him. That was just for them to mark a box to say, oh, yes, we actually support him. But it wasn't helping him. They were sending him, and it wasn't all the time they were sending it to him. And then they came when he was in year 11. Somebody came from the GCS, from GCSE, the board of exams, and told me and said, had a meeting with me on school and said, to be very frank, the person that registers them for GCSE and said, I don't think your son should do GCSE because I've gone through his records, I've gone through everything. He's barely been in school the last 3 years. I don't think he should be doing GCSEs because if he does them and he fails them, that might discourage him, you
Mm.
know. But I had a chat to my son and he said, no, he wants to do some GCSEs. So he did just 4 subjects. He did maths, English, art, and media because he loved art and media. And because art and media involved a lot of coursework. And his teachers in school assured him that they were going to support him because he was very, very good at those 2 subjects, that he should be able to get at least a C. No, it didn't. It got a D and it was very, very upset. It really upset him. And he kept thinking, how could I have got a D? I put in every effort I could. But just like we're saying now, when he was in hospital and he missed some deadlines, nothing was put in place for him to replace that deadline. He was just told, oh, sorry, the deadline has passed. We can't submit anything anymore on your behalf.
So it still boils down to the fact that him being hospitalized and being in pain constantly, having a tough time with sickle cell, impacted negatively on his education.
So with all those kind of things, he ended up not passing it. It contributed to his depression because it was like, I'm sure it just felt useless. It just felt like, so it's been really tough for him. When you're a mother to a child going
That
through
is
all that,
going
it
through
affects
all
you
of
as
that.
well.
Yeah, you feel
It
their
affects
pain.
you. You feel their pain and you have to constantly encourage them. So I have to constantly encourage my son to say, see, you're not stupid. You're not useless. You're intelligent. And he is. My son is very intelligent. I said, it's just unfortunate. Sometimes he does feel down because he looks at his brothers and his sister and is thinking, if I didn't have sickle cell, I could have everything they have. I could move easily through school like them and things like that. His
But
sickle
that's
cell in the
one thing you
past.
really, really need to educate him on, that it is not his fault. It is nothing he has
Oh no, I
done.
tell him
He
that. I tell him
shouldn't
that all
blame
the
himself
time.
for anything.
Yeah. Nah, I tell him that it is. I don't think it blames himself as more that he just blames the illness. That is
Yes.
because of the illness that, and like I said, that was because in the past as well, I think between when he was 14 to 18, he had a really, really bad time of sickle cell. I don't know why. I know some people say at that teenage age, it can be really bad, but over that period of 14 to 18, he had it really, really bad. He had AV, he had osteomyelitis, he had all sorts. It was just one thing or the other, another would come on top of it. So he really had a hard time of it. Add that to the stress of school, to the stress of being misunderstood, not giving the right support. And at a point, I will admit as a parent, you're not looking to, and I think that was one of the places I went wrong. At a point, I wasn't too concerned about school. I was just concerned about survival. So I was like, do you know what? School can wait. It is somebody who is healthy and alive that will go to school anyway.
Exactly.
And so I took my eye off the ball for a while for school.
I missed a whole semester of university due to sickle cell.
Imagine
back in
that.
Nigeria, a whole semester, I think,
Wow.
due to sickle cell. And I remember going back to the university at that age, and some of the lecturers were just like, people that are here for all the lectures, they're not even thinking of passing this course. So how do you think you're going to pass?
Wow.
And I said, I've been studying at home, sir. I couldn't write the test. I missed out on writing the test, writing class assessments and all that. So I understand what your son is going through.
Yeah.
I totally understand. So it is difficult, but it's just something that you need to persevere at, and you need to just encourage him.
Yeah.
Just keep counseling him. And if he needs professional counseling, I think sometimes you just need to put your feet down.
Yeah.
You need to say, look, I'm just a mother.
Yeah.
This is a bit too much for me to handle alone. It's not too much for you, so to say.
Yeah.
But you need professional help. So sometimes you just need to ask for that professional help and take it when it's available. Like there are psychologists and child psychologists that they would be able to understand where he's at, and they will be able to talk to him at a different level from the level you operate.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So it's been tough, but and it's not just me. We all have to do what we can.
Yes, parents,
know? But I think for me, it's this what I just want to get out to other parents with this interview is don't leave the educational development of your children. Don't trust the school 100%. Don't think that they are always there looking out for your kids. You have to do it. And I know how easy it is to take your eye off the ball, because you have so much, especially for people like myself, when you're a lone parent trying to struggle with 3 kids.
I wanted to ask about you being a lone parent. Has that got to do with your child having sickle cell?
No. It had nothing to do with my child having sickle cell. It was something else. Yeah.
Do you have support from other family members?
Well, it's a bit better now, but then my sister lives in London.
So it's quite far.
Yeah, it's quite far. So I can't just walk across the road and say.
So it's difficult.
It is. And I've tried to be part of different parents groups over the years. Manchester, lots of things like this, just to support each other. But then I understand how hard it is when you yourself are barely managing to together to say you want to support other person. I understand how hard that is. But I really think still sickle cell parents, we need a lot of support that we're not getting, and I think that is something the Sickle Cell Society and the sickle cell centers need to, we do need support, especially when you've got other kids and they're all young. There were so many times when my son was in hospital as a child and I'll be in hospital with the other kids, because there was nowhere to leave them. And I remember very well, my youngest one would be running around the ward wearing just Pampers because there was nowhere to put her. And nurses used to ask me, is there nobody else that can take this child? And I'll say, no, there's no one.
Knowing what you now know, would you have done things differently?
It's hard. Like I said, in retrospect, I can see how that affected her growing up, because she started to see things that she shouldn't have seen too early in life, and it's not very good for a child because it's had a real massive effect on her. And that's something else as parents we don't think about. Is this affecting their siblings? Because at the end of the day, they have their own lives as well. We shouldn't make them feel guilty or feel like they're responsible for their brother or sister.
No,
because they are not. They're
not.
You
No one is responsible for having sickle cell other than genetics, the blood.
Exactly. In as much as they love their brother or their sister, they also have their own lives. And I know, especially from our culture, we might look at that as being selfish. They're not. It's just like they're not responsible for their brothers and sisters, and they're not the parent. They can help. It's just finding that balance, really. It's finding the balance so that they can live their own lives while supporting their brothers and sisters. And they shouldn't ever be made to feel guilty that they are enjoying their own lives, because I've seen how it is. And I said to my daughter now, yes, I am responsible for your brother. I'm his mother. You are not. So I'm not expecting you to, So it's nice that you support your brother and you understand what he's going through. And she does help him. So if he's in pain and he can't get something, she'll go get things for him. She'll help him pick up things. She'll help him do things. She'll help him make food sometimes. But I always say to her, thank you, I appreciate that, because that is not your job. So you're doing it because you love your brother, and I appreciate, so.
She doesn't have to be his carer.
No, she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to. And I think as parents, sometimes we are guilty of that. We turn our other children into carers. Unconsciously, we turn them into carers, and we make them feel guilty if they're not doing as much as we think they should.
Yes.
We shouldn't, because at the end of the day, they love their brother or their sister, and they will help. And they can become they can be very protective of them as well. But it's something that develops naturally that we shouldn't force. Or as a parent, that's one of the other things that I think we need to look out for, not to get into that place where we kind of pushing too much responsibility on the other siblings. So
it's not only Black parents, I've seen it happen.
I know it's not. Yeah. No, definitely it is. No, I'm not even saying it about Black parents.
It's just parents. It's just the way it is naturally. Naturally, you tend to empathize with your siblings when they're in pain. You just want to take away the pain. If you could do anything to ease that pain, you just want to do that. So on a last note, what are the lessons you've learned? What message would you like to pass on to parents of children living with sickle cell?
What I've learned as a parent is that you need to listen to your child. If you've been with somebody, for me it's been over 18 years. If you've seen a child, you've been with a child and you've watched them, how they react in pain, you've watched what they've gone through, there's a tendency to begin to think that you can speak for them. At some certain point, parents need to step back and let the children speak for themselves. Because one lesson I've learned is watching somebody in pain, but I started to see that I needed to let my son speak for himself. I can't speak for him because I found out when he was about 10, 11, that people with sickle cell have a very high threshold of pain. So even when he's sitting down there, not looking like it's in a lot of pain, it might actually be in a lot of pain. I can't speak for you. I can't say, just like you've said, you need to let them speak, and you need to encourage them to start knowing their own bodies, that they can tell you and say, I don't need to go to hospital for this. Or, no, I need the hospital now. They tell you, I need the hospital now. Don't try and second guess them and think, but you don't look too bad or whatever. Get them to the hospital now. Those are the things I have learned. And I'm saying this for parents, especially when children are getting to a certain age that they start to assert their independence. And I know it's very tough for us to let go because we want to protect them. We kind of speak for them and things like that. You can't. You need to let them speak. And that leads me to another lesson I've learned. Be on guard in hospitals. That is one of the things that pains me now as an adult, because as an adult now, nobody asks for my opinion anymore. He's regarded as an adult in hospitals. And sometimes, because it's on a male ward, I can't stay there for too long. It really pains me. Because when he was a child, I could pull up a bed and sleep in hospital. I never used to understand it when adult sickle cell patients would tell me some things, but I get it now. Because when they are children and they're in pain and they're out of it, and they can't defend themselves or talk for themselves, the parent is there to fight for them.
To speak for them,
to speak for them. But now that he's an adult and I'm not even allowed in, how does he speak for himself? And I'll give you an example. When COVID started and he was in ICU, he was feeling very ill and he said, Mom, I think I need to go to the hospital. So I knew because of COVID, they wouldn't let me into the hospital. So I called the ambulance. The ambulance guy, the paramedic that came was actually very, very nice. He was like, it's sickle cell. Oh, no, this is very serious. They got him to the hospital very quickly. I would tell you that they left my son for 3 days. No food, just doped up on morphine for 3 days without any substantial treatment. They didn't let me come into the hospital, and I will come in and drop because they said I can't come in. By the second day, I was like, I'm worried. He needs to eat because I know my son, he doesn't like hospital food, especially when he's in pain. Food for him. They said, yes, bring food. I brought food the second day, came back the third day. Can I take the plates in there? Open the plates. All the food were in the plate. Nothing had been eaten. No, because nobody bothered to pay attention to say, can you try and eat? Nobody. He was in pain. He was in a lot of pain. He was doped up. By the third day, I went into the hospital and I was saying, I am not leaving if you don't let me see my son. I am not leaving. I insisted. And I packed myself there. And I sat in the hospital. There was nobody around because of COVID. I had my mask on and I said, I am not leaving. I need to see my son. I brought some food. Finally, they let me come in. I went in to see him, sat at his bed. My son looked at me and said, are you here or am I hallucinating? That is how bad. They did nothing for 3 days. When I asked them and I said, this boy is having a chest crisis. What are you going to do? By now, he should have been on antibiotics. Should have been on that. Nothing. They said, oh, we are waiting for the result of the COVID test. Has COVID first before we can decide the treatment. But I said, are you guys having a laugh? You want to kill somebody?
I suppose that's one of the reasons why the COVID death figures were high at the time. So many people were left untreated for the different illnesses they had. Can you imagine somebody being in hospital, not having treatment for 3 days?
No, they died of something else. I'm telling you this, a lot of people died not because of COVID. They just wrote suspected COVID.
They died with COVID. They weren't actually diagnosed with COVID.
That's why they put suspected COVID. Of course, chest crisis.
Imagine your son not having a high pain threshold.
Yeah, because the symptoms
and being
of
in
COVID
that
are
level
very
of
similar.
pain and ignored, abandoned.
3 days. 3 days. I'm telling you. The ambulance picked him on Sunday. This day I'm talking about to you was a Wednesday morning. In fact, that is more than 3 days, isn't it? Sunday, Monday. Yeah.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's 4 days, actually.
So I went in there and I said, no way. Fortunately, while I was there, they said, oh, the result of the COVID came back is negative. I said, oh, I told you this. When he came in on Sunday, that he doesn't have COVID. They said, oh, well, we have to be sure first. And this was the start of COVID. He went into hospital March 28th. So this was at the very start of COVID where it used to take 3 days. They left him. When they now said, oh, it's not COVID, it's definitely chest crisis. He was now in a really bad, it was just God that watched over him that I didn't lose it. That's in a really bad state. That was when they rushed him into ICU. And that day they did him a blood exchange. They had to do a blood exchange. He couldn't talk. He was in so much pain. He couldn't talk for himself. He couldn't fight for himself. If he had been when he was a child, I know even with COVID, maybe they wouldn't let me come in, but, because he was an adult, nobody was even bothering to call me to say, this is what is going on. And they would be like, oh yeah, we got his permission. And I'm thinking, what permission? And when I asked my son, he said, honestly, can't remember what happened those 3, 4 days it was.
No, when you're in that kind of pain, you don't even remember. When you have a chest crisis, it's horrible.
He said he can't tell me what happened, that he knows that sometimes he will see nurses standing by his bed, that he can't tell me this is what they gave him, or if they gave him any medicine, he can't tell me. He doesn't know.
That's because he doesn't even remember.
And that is one thing that frightens me about being an adult at that age, about being regarded as an adult at that, because it's just, I'm telling you, it's a very...
How is he coping in college now?
No, he's all right now.
Is he still... Right now. Okay, he's still studying from home now, actually.
Yes, he's still studying from home, yes. So
at least you've got him under your watch. Yeah.
So they took him into ICU and They were going to do an exchange. They couldn't get a line.
The veins would have gone at that.
Exactly.
Without food, without water, without anything for 3 days. The veins collapse.
Yeah. They couldn't get anything. So at a point, he was screaming and said, I want my mother. I want my mother. Doctors were saying rubbish to him. Like, oh, if we don't get this, you're going to die. So I came into hospital, and the first thing I did was warn the doctor and said, please don't ever say that to my son. Don't pronounce negative words over my son. Don't say that to my son. And I don't think the doctor liked it, but at that point, I just didn't care because I was so frustrated, and so they let me into ICU, even though the ICU was filled with COVID people. They let me in because my son says, you've punctured my hips or thighs 2 times. You've put all sorts in my hand. You can't find the veins. I want my mother. So I had to go in and I had to go sit with him. And finally, they got a line in through his neck. That was how we did the blood exchange, through his neck. And I had to say, you guys are going to have to give him some anesthesis and knock him out a bit. I don't see how you're going to go through his neck with him completely awake. It's not going to be funny. But that was because I was finally able to come in and speak for him. Imagine if I hadn't been able to go in. Please imagine the situation. And this is what frightens me about children moving on too quickly to adulthood. And that is something parents need to be aware of. It can be frightening.
And with this COVID situation, relatives are not allowed to be with them.
And then that's your child there, completely knocked out, in pain, not even knowing what is going on. When he saw me, he thought it was hallucinating. He didn't believe I was standing there. That was how bad he had gotten. There's a lot for parents to deal with, I'm telling you. And I know so many other parents would have dealt with some of these things I'm saying. It's a lot for a parent to deal with. And we don't have as much support as we should have, which is painful. And
I think actually you need counseling yourself because it's a lot for you to deal with.
Well, you don't get that that's another thing parents of people with sickle cell don't get. Somebody once told me that they found that a lot of people with sickle cell and their parents suffer from post-traumatic stress. Yeah. And I said, well, I won't be surprised.
To be honest, the experience you've had is a bit unfair with work, with the support you had for him. And I think there is a lot that needs to be done.
There is.
So this is why we need to raise this awareness about sickle cell and how it impacts on people, how it impacts on families, how people just don't even get the support they need.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yes, it's just something. So really, like you said, let's keep raising awareness of this. Maybe doctors and people, I don't know who, we start taking notes to say, do you know what? This community needs more support than we provide for them.
Exactly.
They're not getting the right support.
We don't get the right support. We don't get the right level of care. Yeah. You have nurses that are not actually trained to handle sickle cell patients or even hematology specialist nurses.
Yeah.
They are not sickle cell nurses. They're just general nurses. And they don't understand sickle cell.
So the first question I asked is, God forbid, let's even say it was COVID. For a sickle cell patient who, you should have realized that the first thing is, let's even get him
the care he needs.
A blood transfusion or an exchange so that we can give him
even an antibiotic to boost his immunity.
So that he has a fighting chance to even fight the COVID.
Yeah.
But when his body is already weakened, how is he going to fight it? Because for a sickle cell patient, it's not just about, let's put him on a ventilator or whatever they do with other people. It has to have enough red blood cells to even fight.
Exactly. And so most of us, because we've already lost this spleen, the organ that fights infections, that's why we're always on antibiotics. And at a point, antibiotics, body sometimes develops resistance, particular antibiotic.
Of course.
And then it doesn't work anymore.
Of course. And that was when I realized that, I now know why so many people died.
They didn't die of COVID.
Because imagine if that was like a heart failure and you left somebody for 3 days and say, we can't treat him until his COVID test comes back. He will be dead before the 3 days.
He will be dead by then.
Even him, if not for God, he could have been dead. And then they would have put, God forbid, on the thing and said COVID-related death or COVID said, if for somebody who never had COVID.
I am so happy for you. I'm grateful that you are able to share all of this. And it's something that a lot of parents need to be able to do, sharing their stories, because the more we share these stories, the more people are educated about what we go through, what happens with sickle cell.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine you had to change your career. Your son was never even given the support he needed for college. I mean, it's
hospital. You have problems in hospital. In hospitals that you think you should have all the support or they should know it. You get to some hospitals and you're the one telling the doctors what you need them to do.
Oh, yeah.
Education, not much support. They want to treat you like everyone else. Don't recognize that sickle cell has its own unique problem.
It's not even about sickle cell having unique problems. Each person's care plan is different from your care plan.
I mean things like if a sickle cell child misses school, you can't tell them to come to catch-up class at 7 p.m.
No.
Little things like that, which will be common to a lot of them. They're already exhausted from being in college 9 to 5. And then you want them to stay back to do a 7 o'clock catch up. Or you tell them, or you tell them that maybe they go to college 3 days of a week, which is already exhausting. And you tell them to come in an additional day for catch-ups. That's not going to work. For example, I'm grateful now that they've allowed him to be a home student online. And these were things I suggested before. Online support for maybe people with sickle cell so that they can constantly, even when there was no COVID and classes, that's a way for them to catch up things. I record videos of classes so that they can listen to it. I remember when my son started college, I said to them, sometimes his finger swells and he can't write. Can he please bring his own laptop? He's got a laptop. Can he please bring his own laptop to a college? Or can he record lectures? And they say, oh, no, we don't allow that. Wow. Because when people are on laptops, they start to go to Facebook and play around. But in social media, it doesn't like social media like that. Maybe he chats with his cousins on IG, Instagram. Apart from that, it doesn't do Facebook. It doesn't even like WhatsApp. I forced him to download it so that I can send him some things sometimes, but he won't even go on it. And I said, no, he's not interested in things like that because I got him some software on his laptop to make life easy. I said, he's got all that to support him. Can't allow that. Okay, can you come and record classes so that I can go back up and listen to them? Because if he's in pain and he misses out half of what you're saying, he can go back and listen to them. Oh, no, you can't allow him to record lectures. I've heard that it's a lot of colleges, to be honest. I'm sure they're being careful and thinking, if you record your tutors, they don't know what you're recording. What if you use it against them in future or something? I don't know. But those are the little
data protection. Data protection laws are there, but it's supposed to be used within reasonable
but the tutor himself can record his own classes, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you don't want the student and send it out, like you have all these batch sizes on whatever for GCSE. Yeah, you can record it and send it to your students while you're in class and send to your students to read over and things like that. But that's what I mean by schools have to recognize that sickle cell students have their own unique ways. You can't just support them like every other person.
And they learn at a different pace.
Exactly. They learn at a different pace. How many? I remember when I was a teacher, I met a young lady who had sickle cell. And it wasn't until I got to that college that she had a lot of the support she finally got. Because when I came in and I met her and she started telling me how she's been struggling in college, I just went to the head of learning services and said, no, do you understand what sickle cell is? And she didn't. She had no clue.
Yeah, they don't understand.
I had to educate her. And she was quite nice. She was like, do you know what? I'm so glad that you came and told me all this. Because I didn't understand it. When I'm talking to the student, I can't see. I just thought maybe they were being frivolous or they were just asking for things unnecessarily. First thing you should have given her when she came into college is a lift pass. Because you expect her to be climbing how many stories every day, the classes. And then she has to come down for lunch and then go back up. You have different classes on different levels and she's up and down every day. I said, you are killing her, And the tutor was like, she's so glad I came to talk to her because she didn't realize that. And I said, she needs to be able to like get up in class and even just go out and stretch her legs if she wants to, or if her back is aching and she thinks that, because she said sometimes her back is aching and she stands in class and teachers get mad at her that, she's being disruptive. And I said, no, if that's what she needs, let her do it. She should be able to get up in class and go to the back of the class and stand up if that is what she needs for a while, and then go back to sitting. And if she needs a different chair, college should be able to provide that. That's what is called reasonable adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Provide a more ergonomic chair for her if that's what is needed.
Yeah.
So these are little things that college don't know. They just don't, they don't get that when the kids have missed school, nobody says, oh, okay, you've missed all this. How do we help you catch up and teach you what you've missed? They just expect them to come in and jump in and continue. For somebody who misses classes maybe once a year or once a term, that might not be too bad. But for a sickle cell child who is constantly missing school, that is just not good enough. That is not good enough. So, yeah.
I really appreciate your time today, and I really appreciate you coming to share your story. It's been insightful, and I hope a lot of people will learn from this, and there might be changes that would come from this podcast.
I hope so.
Hopefully, I hope so. It's heard everywhere. So hopefully somebody would hear and make changes, and we will keep sharing this podcast. We keep sharing these stories until something happens. We just push and keep going at it.
If there's any last thing I would like to say to parents, please do not keep quiet over your children in schools, in hospitals. Please do not keep quiet. Even if they think you're crazy, please do not keep quiet. Keep going in there. Keep talking to people. Speak up. Don't keep quiet, please. Thank you for all you're doing. This is a really great work you're doing, getting the word out there.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so very much.
I appreciate it. Well, I know it has been an emotional session, but I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Nike Ajene. She has shared a story, and that of her son who is living with sickle cell disorder. And the story she has shared today is representative of 1,000 other parents with children living with sickle cell disorder. She has had to make sacrifices, had to make career choices that were not actually a choice, but something she needed to do in order to be able to provide care for a child living with sickle cell. But I feel the society needs to understand how sickle cell impacts on people. I feel the society needs to do more. I feel the society needs to be informed about the effects of sickle cell on us as patients. And that is why I started this podcast. So thank you for listening today. Keep sharing, keep downloading, and keep liking. Thank you.
A big thank you to all our listeners who have been sending us messages through the message link. I would like to thank everyone who has listened in so far and contributed to this podcast. Thank you so much. We couldn't have done anything without you. Keep listening, keep sharing, keep downloading, and keep liking. Thank you again.